we have our relationship on the same level of importance as our work and as the children, of course, the energy, if we don't do that, the energy doesn't flow. Wherever I bring awareness to, energy follows. So if I want to have a different outcome, if I want to feel fulfilled and connected with my beloved, then of course I want to bring energy to the relationship.
So if you look at the relationship as an opportunity to transform and grow, because I'm fine in the forest by myself, it's when I'm triggered and it looks like it's over there and really it's my trigger. So
take a girl and a guy and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate, a dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Kadkodian. And this is their podcast, Couples Synergy.
Welcome back to another episode of Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean. Hi, I'm Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean. And this is our podcast about love, marriage, and relationships.
Be sure to check us out online on our Facebook page and Instagram at Couple Synergy or our website, couplesynergy.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast or send us any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. And now on to Couple Synergy, an in-depth look at love, marriage, and relationships, where we bring you our experience helping thousands of couples transform their relationships for nearly 20 years.
Everyone says you should work on a relationship, but nobody teaches us how. So we've created this podcast to teach people what they can do to create the relationship they've always dreamed of
with the partner they fell in love with. On today's episode, we welcome Dr. Elsbeth and Freddie. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us on our podcast today.
Oh, you're so welcome. We are delighted to be with you.
Great to be here. You guys look great.
Thank you. You guys do too. And so we've known you guys for a pretty long time, but maybe you guys can introduce yourself to our audience. How old are you? How long have you been together? And what do you do for a living?
I'm 25 years old. No.
Yay.
You look great. 25.
Okay, darling,
you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Freddie Zental Weaver. I'll be 64 years old next month. And 65. 65. Yes.
Who's counting, right?
Yes, who's counting? You lose track after a certain age,
Yeah.
And we've been together for 20 years. We have had our TantraNova Institute here in Chicago for the last 20 years. And we're now all over the world doing our work. We've been working with couples and singles and teaching them practices of how to work consciously with our life force or sexual energy to get more deeply connected to what we most deeply desire and want to create in our life. So I was first introduced to these practices that we teach when I was 13 years old. I was living in Hawaii. My father at the time was a practicing psychiatrist, and I at 13 was going through my puberty and spending a lot of time in the shower. So my father took pity on me and gave me a book to read on how to integrate meditation and sex practices, sexual meditation. Probably thought I was going to hurt myself in there. And well, I loved it. My girlfriend loved it. My athletics improved. My academics improved. I went on to college on an athletic scholarship. And subsequently, after college, I taught school for a while. I was in software business for a long while in San Francisco. And when I first started that work, I'd continued to do the meditations and practices and read books and do workshops. And what I knew about this work was being inspired about my life. And after 15 years in that industry, the software business, I was not excited about my day. So I was looking to reinvigorate my life. So there was an opportunity in Chicago. Company hired me, moved me here. That was 20 years ago. I was single at the time. So I was online looking for a Shakti, a female Tantra partner. We're one of the original online couples. And Elsbeth had her profile online. And so we met. And we almost immediately had this baby 20 years ago in this TantraNova. And we love what we do and really excited to see what opens up for people. We do these practices and we're constantly in the work ourselves. So we're excited to be here with you guys today and share more about that.
Great.
That's awesome. And Elsbeth, what was your journey?
Oh, quite different, Dr. Ray, than Freddie's. I wish I would have had a dad who would have given me a book on sex consciousness when I was a teenager, but far from it. I grew up in Germany. I'm one of 10 children. religious background. And so although when I hit puberty, I really got interested in all things sexual, to the chagrin of my parents, of course. So I came to the United States in my late 20s to do postgraduate work in music. And then from there, did teaching in a big Boston public school, not public school, it was a music school. And then I got my doctorate in education. And then from there, I moved into management consulting. And that all was in the 90s. And I had gotten really good at the consulting part, however, was miserable in relationship. I had this pattern of attracting unavailable men. And while that was exciting at times, most of the time I was alone. And there came a point, I vividly remember, when I got very despaired over not ever having lasting intimacy in my life, like the emphasis on lasting, because I did have intimacy and love in my life, but I was not able to sustain it. And that was the moment when I said, okay, Elsbeth, you need to change something. And that brought me to delve deeply into the practice of meditation and then Tantra. And that learning and opening and healing was so powerful that I decided to leave the consulting work and start my own business. And through that healing I experienced through the tantric work, I had become available. And 6 months later, Freddie showed up in my life. And, ever since we have been together, and it's such a privilege to work together, just the two of us, of you, being a couple. It's so beautiful sharing with other couples because both the feminine and masculine is represented in the listening, in the speaking. And we are excited to share more with you and your audience today.
So, it's been my experience that our sexual energy and our spiritual energy come from the same place. And so when we have sexual wounds, I think they're the deepest wounds that we can have. Is that what you guys have experienced or seen in the people that you work with?
It's really a question of, what you already alluded to, the sexual, spiritual connection and integration, which is so alien to our culture, because sex and the spiritual are not supposed to belong together. One is very much our earthly being, and the other one is our heavenly being. And at the same time, you also said, they really belong together. I don't know if they come from the same place, but they complement each other. Mm-hmm. Just like the North and the South Pole complement each other. So we can look at our spiritual self and our sexual self like these are these two poles. And if we grow up, as most of us have, that they don't belong together, it's like the South Pole and the North Pole are getting torn apart, So the work that we share with couples has much to do with, for each individual and then together, to tune with that beautiful sexual self that is our life force expression. Without it, none of us would be here. We wouldn't be talking here. Nobody would be listening to us. To connect with that and, move it to our spiritual self, and then drawing from the spiritual self down into our sexual self, so they can communicate with each other, they can imbue each other, and they can come like a marriage, like a oneness, while they feel different, have a different feel, but they complement each other. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to add, Jean, to your, some of the deepest wounds, sexual wounds. So whatever the wounding is, if we're in our sexual selves, and a lot of it happens around our sexual because we're in the sexual, and then we have all these expectations, and then the other brings what they bring, and then we're hurt in some kind of a way, and it's much more deeply felt, because when we're in our sexual energy, we're more open, loving, vulnerable, receptive. Chemically, we're changed, more oxytocin, endorphin, serotonin. So we're totally in a really open place, which is different from where we live in that left calculating Machiavellian brain analytical self. And so when we're wounded there, it's very deeply felt, which is maybe part of why there's been so much restriction and vilification around the sexual, because it is so loving, and when I think of spirituality, before we had language and had any idea of spirituality, the sexual took us to that place, that little death, that little mindless oneness of creation. So what we're teaching are practices, the yogic, energetic practice of how to tap more deeply into that energetic place that sexual leads us to, aligned with intention of what we want to create, whether it's freedom around a restriction or a hurt sexually, or something you want to create in your life.
I was wondering if you guys can talk a little bit about what Tantra is, because I think people, they have a very misconception of what that word means and what the practices are that you guys are referring to. It's a very old practice, correct?
Right. It's an ancient practice that comes from East India. There's also a form of Tantra that originates from China, although it's called then the Tao of sex. I'm so glad you asked, because while Freddie was speaking, I thought that too. We should actually say a little bit more about what's Tantra, So Tantra is the energetic yoga, while it's of the Tantra is the yoga of the energetic body. That is what I want to say. While Hatha yoga is the yoga of the physical body. Most of us are familiar with the physical body yoga, that we can learn at every corner now where there's a yoga studio. Mm-hmm. Tantra yoga focuses on the energies that run through us at all times. Without it, we wouldn't be alive. So life force energy emanates from the base of the spine and then moves up in a serpentine way to the top of the head and back down again. It does this all the time, all on its own. We can liken it with blood flow. The blood flow, we don't have to plug ourselves in to the outlet in the morning for our blood flow to flow, and as the veins and arteries are the grid for blood flow, the nervous system is the grid for energy flow. And given that none of us has learned about human energy, we may have learned in school or college about, electrical energy, nuclear energy, but curiously enough, we don't learn about human energy in biology class. I didn't. Although it's the most powerful energy there is, because it brings forth life. Nuclear energy is powerful too, but it cannot bring forth life. So we want to learn and tune more with that wonderful life-giving energy that moves through us all the time, and only can move with the breath. If we don't breathe, we die. It's obvious. So if they go together in dying, they must go together when we are alive. And that is what we put to use here. So in the practices, we learn how to listen to our breath, to breathe consciously instead of just reflexively, which is a good thing that we breathe reflexively. Otherwise, we would suffocate or not have enough oxygen. So we learn how to breathe consciously, because then with the breath, I can move energy into my fingertip, can move my aroused energy from my sexual center up into my heart center or in my third eye center. And you may get already a sense of how energy can then move through me and be experienced not only in the area where it emanates from, but all over. And that brings us then to orgasmic energy that can be moved throughout the body, throughout the being. It can be moved with a beloved, where we can be in a circuit, and of course then it becomes very blissful.
I've noticed that when we're young, when our sexual energy begins to open up or turn on, it's very physical. It's very much more physical. And, I'm 54 now, and it's becoming much more spiritual. And in between there, somewhere, between like 30 and 50, that's where it really seems to be on more of an emotional level, that, the wounds early in life are physical, and then they're emotional with our partners. And we see a lot of couples that have kind of just shut down sexually. They're overwhelmed in their lives energetically. They've got kids and jobs, and they don't spend time together, and there's no feeding of the relationship. There's a breakdown in their communication. And then they start sleeping with their kids for comfort, but not each other for sexuality and love and bonding. How would you describe that process or that kind of developmental cycle?
Yeah, we've been together for 20 years, and we've been through all kinds of variations in our relationship, but we've always stuck to our relationship. And I think what happens for a lot of folks is that we are not taught how to handle the emotional ups and downs of our lives, because, you're kind of brought into this world, and we don't choose our parents. And then, all this stuff happens, and we, are making decisions out of survival, a lot of it instinctually. And then so when we get married, we start repeating unconsciously all of that stuff from our relationship, from our family. And so what we aren't really trained to do or shown practices to do are how to manage this emotional piece, this physical experiential piece, this story belief piece, and then this witness piece. This witness piece is where we can actually watch all of that other total felt sense of a story or an experience, and then begin to move slowly with ease, grace, and flow towards what we most deeply desire. And that's what these practices are about, because we're more than all of those experiences. And that's where I think many couples get stuck. So they go to the kids for comfort because that's just a natural thing. And even though the sex may wane as we get older, you still can do a lot of things to connect and feel whole and nurtured. And that starts to disappear because I think people start to shut down because we're overwhelmed with all the old stories and all the make wrongs and all the only if you did this, we're like subjected to our own lives, And so that's what we see open up for people when they start doing this work, is they start to really see choice in their life.
Yeah, you said earlier, Jean, that, we have so much training in many other areas in your life. We never would go into a career without extensive education, training, mentorship, and so forth. Relationship, we just jump into it. And this is not an individual thing. It's a collective thing that we haven't considered, that, there could be just a relationship training over time, not just one shot. And that is, I was so, I had never learned about it. And when I met Freddie, I said, in our Tantra school, let's identify the principles and practices that bring forth relationship on an ongoing basis, and we cannot sustain what we don't know. The feeling when we fall in love is so strong. The hormones are high, the newness, we are so in love that we really cannot see the other person for who he is or she is. It's just so wonderful. But when I fall in love, I don't know what I do or what I did, so I cannot replicate it. And if we just talk, going back to the couple cultivation, what is so sweet about Tantra is that there are very particular practices long before we jump into the bedroom.
Yeah, if you could approach the relationship as an opportunity to be in a transformational place, because that's really where the rubber meets the road, where we can really start to transform.
Let's give some practical. Can we do that? Some practical.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So we have some practices that we call tantric quickies, and that's not a quickie when we have a sexual encounter. It's
connection quickies.
A connection encounter. And it can be done in a nanosecond. So, for example, there is this heart-to-heart connection where we just place our left hand on each other's heart. And we look into each other's left eye because the left eye is correlated to the right brain hemisphere. And that's the hemisphere where we feel, where we are playful, artistic, experiential, versus the other hemisphere, which is linear, trying to figuring it out. You'll never figure out a relationship, but you can tune with another. And that is what this is about.
And so what we do here is we just gaze into the left eye and we connect with our breath, so we're breathing parasympathetically. So as opposed to sympathetically in the upper lungs and chest, we're bringing the breath consciously down, trachea, lungs, into the diaphragm and expanding the belly like a big balloon on our inhalation.
So we are breathing in. And on the exhalation, Freddie exhales and sends his love into my heart center. When we inhale, then I receive Freddie's love through his hand. Exhale, we send. Inhale, we receive. While we gaze, and sometimes we just even close our eyes. However, the breath is synchronized. Breathing in together, receiving.
Sending on the exhalation.
And it's a love circle because the heart is the center of love, the frequency. So that really gets us out of the head. And when we have differences, I'm very much in my head. I'm justified that Freddie did something wrong. I'm right. Definitely he is wrong. And that doesn't open up anything.
So what the practice does is it gives us a break from that story making, from that righteous, indignation about someone's doing something to me. And then from there, you can make a request or let it go or whatever it happens to be in the space. But what always shows up is an okayness, a stillness, a savasana, just the breathing and being, which is always there.
And I would say the love, because that's the only place where we can reconcile within and with another.
And the choice.
So that is like just as what I said earlier with, through the breath moving energy. So we can also do this in coitus, where we are in embrace, and then Freddie breathes up his wonderful energy from his sexual center into his heart center, connects from his heart center to my heart center. I can
send it here, the sixth chakra.
Yeah.
Breathing in, sending and breathing in.
Yeah, I like particularly being connected in my heart because that is where I find myself. So when he comes from his heart into mine, then not only my heart opens, but also my sexual center opens. And then we have a circuit that I spoke about earlier, where we are in this blissful circuit together. We breathe together. The synchronized breath allows for a sense of becoming one. And once we are used to it, it just really takes a nanosecond and the willingness to go there.
And this is what we teach in our workshops. And we teach this to people who are familiar with meditation or not familiar. It's a matter of your willingness to learn and put yourself into it. And once you do, anybody in a body can get it. And a lot of the stuff and the issues and the things that show up in relationship just disappear, or they become something very approachable.
Yeah.
For couples.
One of the things that we say a lot is that having a relationship with a committed partner is one of the most difficult things you will ever have to do in your life, just because of the amount of work that is necessary, right? Just over a long-term process of being in a relationship with someone. And when I'm kind of listening to a lot of the practices, what you guys are talking about here, I hear common, normal couples out there saying, that seems like a lot of work, right? It seems like just you have to spend a lot of time connecting. And it seems as though our culture and our society today, it doesn't support that. What it supports is this quick, get my needs met right away, and I don't have time for anything, in that society, in this society. And unfortunately, a lot of couples, they don't actually get to the point of working through their relationship over a course of 20 years, right? Because they ditch out too quickly. And then they start that process over again, right? With someone else. I won't.
Exactly. Wherever you go, there you are, and it's like, oh, well, it was her fault. Now I got a new level, and now it's her fault again. And the one constant is me, right? So COVID's been really good though, because people have really had to slow down and be confronted with themselves, and so this work, I think, is going to become more and more empowering as we continue to, move on and expand. So if you look at the relationship as an opportunity to transform and grow, because I'm fine in the forest by myself. It's when I'm triggered and it looks like it's over there and really it's my trigger. So
right.
So also, it's like, unless we have our relationship on the same level of importance as our work and as the children, of course, the energy, if we don't do that, the energy doesn't flow. Wherever I bring awareness to, energy follows. So if I want to have a different outcome, if I want to feel fulfilled and connected with my beloved, then of course I want to bring energy to the relationship. And energy always has to do with awareness, attention, focus, time. I'm not saying that it has to take up a lot of time, because when I connect with Freddie like this, we can have this right now.
That's just minutes.
We bring our focus to it. It needs to be practiced a little bit.
Yeah, there needs to be some practice cultivation.
I was going to say, probably you have to practice it multiple times, and make it consistent throughout the relationship for it to have that spark really quickly. And
we do this, we do it daily. Just Freddie comes over to my desk, he places his hands on my chest, one in the front, one in the back. I'm very busy with the computer. Why? But we have the agreement that when one comes to the other like that, we take time out, even if it's just 30 seconds. But in those 30 seconds, we are totally there.
You let it go.
We breathe together. The computer disappears because I say so. I'm committed to that. And so I just want to bring this to couples here, that it's not all a matter of time, but a matter of focus and willingness.
Can you guys speak to, when you were showing us the exercise, you talked about bringing energy up, you talked about connecting through the heart, and you talked about connecting through the third eye. I would guess that there is a biological thing happening on different levels with different hormones. And I know that, we practice this as well. And it just, when we have days where we have to get out of bed really quick in the morning, you feel off all day. And I know there's a oxytocin thing going on or something. You can just feel safer and less anxious in the world when you have that bonding time in the morning. But I was curious about those 3 different centers, if it feels different, and if it's, I don't know if you know any biology that goes with that.
Yeah, I think in general, the biology is the endorphins and the serotonin and the oxytocin that happen when we breathe parasympathetically, particularly. So that's when we bring the breath down in the diaphragm and we extend the belly. Now, for most of us, we can do that for about 3 breaths before our mind starts to wander, get busy, distraction. So as we continue to focus in that kind of breathing, we start to, the people say to me, oh, my mind's too busy. I never could meditate, Well, the mind's not going to stop. But what we can do is learn to watch the story like a, story floating down the river without the total felt sense or buy-in of the story. And that's what starts to evolve. So in the morning, when I got to get up early or do something early, you just put your hand on your belly and you do 10 belly breaths. Takes a few seconds.
Okay, so let's go back to the 3 centers, because there's a distinction between men and women. And I'm speaking in men and women, but the same applies to same-sex couples, actually. Because in every relationship, there's one more, particularly in the sexual, intimate realm, more in their masculine or yang place, and the other one in their feminine or yin self. And so the one who is more in the yang, usually when they want to connect, and often it's the men in heterosexual couples, not always, but most of the time.
And that bounces back and forth even.
Yeah. And so when a man wants to connect, or the one who is more in their masculine, they start feeling it in their sexual center. Most women, or the one who is in their feminine, starts feeling it in their heart center. So we both want to connect, but we are just like two ships passing in the night. He's coming from here, I'm coming from there. So in the tantric practice, the man learns how to breathe up his wonderful sexual, powerful testosterone energy into his heart, fueling his heart, becoming more connected to his love energy, which actually integrates him first and foremost. And then from there, he can connect with her heart. And when she feels connected with her heart, her sexual center opens. So that it's very essential to know that, because many couples who come to us, they love each other deeply, but there's somewhere a disconnect. And it has to do with the difference in masculine and feminine energy, where masculine energy is, getting easily excited and quickly erect, and then drops quickly the energy. While feminine sexual energy rises slowly, hangs out, we don't know if it's coming or going, however, when it's reawakened, it can come up to a plateau and then stay on that plateau for a long time. Multiple orgasms, orgasmic waves. So we want to meet on that plateau instead of having this. He came and went.
Literally and figuratively.
And he's hanging out there. So we really want to come to this, where he can hold space, breathing up his wonderful energy into his heart center. In that sense, she can open up because she trusts when he encounters her like that, and then they ride the wave together.
Right.
So
you asked earlier, Dr. Ray, what was Tantra? And so Tantra is a lot of things, and one of the main primary edicts of all the variations, we're TantraNova, TantraNova, so we're integrating aspects of the East and also aspects of Eastern yoga, the energetic yoga, breathing and meditation and inward looking, and also aspects of the West in terms of generative language, how we create our reality in language, creative self-discovery, how we discover ourselves in the creative process, some of the more Western approaches to transformation and seeing something we don't see about how we're creating our life. And we've created TantraNova, TantraNova. But one of the primary edicts in all the variations there are, and there are many, is for the man to learn to separate ejaculation from orgasm, because that begins the process of exactly what Elsbeth was talking about, where the man begins to bring consciousness to this unconscious aspect of his sexual being. And so we integrate those practices with the sexual energy, with meditation, aligned with intention and seeing. And then once you start learning all these different gymnastics, you're able real quickly to drop into some of those quickies that we talked about and get nourished again and revitalized and energized. And so it's a 3-day workshop that we take people through typically, or we work individually with people. But again, the results have been wonderful.
Now we know that as the body gets older, we go through biological developmental stages, right? And I was wondering if you guys can comment on any differences in, ages. As we age, is there any sexual developmental stages that we go through that you guys notice when you're working with couples?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So we come from that pleasure can be achieved through 3 different ways. The first one is mechanically, like a vibrator or a massage. That's a mechanical kind of raising the energy, which always has to do with raising blood flow, because greater blood flow brings forth aliveness, and aliveness then brings forth pleasure. Pleasure doesn't happen, without increased energy flow. The second one is chemically, like popping a pill or something like Viagra. This is why they invented that, which brings blood flow to the magic wand, the penis. They haven't been as good with that yet for women. We are a little bit more complex, I think. But anyway, it's that we can do it chemically, or take another form of drugs, to get us high. The third one is energetically, and that is where we come in. It's not that wants to be cultivated. It's not like popping a pill. And so when we grow older, we really want to look from all these three aspects, that we tune with our energy. And Jean, as you said earlier, the older you get, the more connected you become to your spiritual self or the spiritual. And that we shift over time, again, as you said, from a physical to emotional and then spiritual. And so at the same time, there are other dimensions when we talk about the chemical, to consider if there may be some hormonal therapy that has helped me a great deal to, bring the spark back in terms of that physical sensation. Of course, connected with the energetic and the flowing and the connecting. So I think that we want to really take that into consideration. The third one is to really look at where am I in my conversations and narratives. In my head, are they conducive to connecting in love? Or am I coming from, I'm not wanted, or it's just over for us, or we can have a lot of deadening conversations that are not conducive to connecting, to being alive, to be joyous,
Yeah, there's a lot of, as men get older, young, you have lots of testosterone energy, and the lingam is always hard at the blowing of the wind, and as we get older, that energy wanes. And even young people now, they're finding are having ED problems because of the masturbation. Online, they're deadening a lot of young guys are deadening their nerve endings on their penis from masturbating so much to the pornography. I see the pornography as kind of part of the social cycle. It's like now that's available. It's like the little kid who says, can I eat my dessert before my dinner? And you say, okay, go ahead. And they eat all the cupcakes, and now their stomach is sore. Next time you say, let's try some vegetables. They say, okay. So now it's like people are gorging themselves with, there was a guru I used to follow. I still do. He's gone. But when his people would come to study with him, he would have them be in a room and have sex for like a week. And after they were all worn out, he would come in and say, now we meditate. It's like people have to almost gorge themselves, which is what they're doing now, to get now to more subtle levels. So my point here is that even with a soft on or a flaccid penis or lingam, one can glean pleasure from that. And once you start tapping in the way we're teaching people to tap into energy and sexual energy and pleasure, that starts to become much more available. So even an older person who might have an ED issue in a physiological sense can still gain pleasure from a soft on. And again, as Elsbeth said, there's things that guys can do with, hormonal treatment stuff, or, surgery even, or Viagra or pumps. There's lots of things they can do to have a harder lingam. But even without the hardness, there's pleasure even just in the breeze on your arm, or just the smile of a rainbow. Things become much more brighter as we tap in more deeply to that kind of awareness.
It was an interesting thing. I don't know if I read it, heard it. There's always so much content, and I need to get better at, sourcing these, but someone was talking about your heart and how your heart fills up just like our sex organs do. And you actually get a full heart when you are doing that kind of breath work and that bonding and connection. Absolutely. So I know exactly what you're talking. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's available to anyone who does the practices.
Yeah. And then just to, go back to what you opened up in the beginning to, this can just as much open, where we open the portal literally to the unified field, So now, of course, all of what we are describing here requires attention, time with yourself, time with your beloved. Growing older avails us these questions and inquiries further, because things may not work so easily as they may have worked when we were 25. However, we need to go there. Whatever, growing or maturing offers us is that we want to transmute that into our own experience. And so we come back to these three anchors again of the physical, sexual, emotional, love, and mental, spiritual, that then become integrated. And yes, of course, we may want to spend a while, a few weeks or perhaps more, into the exploration of the heart center, or as I have been doing it, into the exploration of my connection with consciousness, not only my personal consciousness, but consciousness at large, so to speak, frequency that, of course, then opens up new worlds. And I think there's so much beauty in maturing, like in oneself and then in couplehood. And
It's interesting, Freddie, you were talking about pornography, and I was kind of, surprised to hear you say that it's a cycle and that we are coming back to now people really trying to connect at that more organic level of connecting with their partner and not going to pornography, for this external type of, pleasure. It seems as though sex has been married more with shame and, insecurities in our society. And it seems like this kind of work it really brings out a lot of that, those past wounds and that shame. And I was wondering if you guys can comment a little bit about that and how your work helps people with that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Ray. And it's really very poignant for people because, as I said earlier, that we've all been subjected to some form of repression around our sexual selves, or embarrassment or shame or something, and some more than others, of sexual abuse and so on. So when we start to learn these practices of meditation, and particularly coupled with a sexual practice, then people get confronted. And it's only in the witness that we can start to, sift through, move through, be with all of that emotional, energetic story stuff that shows up. So that's really the opportunity. I see it as an opportunity to really get past something that is pervasive societally and individually, and through the confronting it allows us more freedom and flow in our lives.
Instead of confronting, I would like to say, like going there and opening up into freedom.
I like that word too. I like that.
So that given that it's a collective heritage, shame, fear, and guilt, it's not my own. I learned it from my dad, from my mom. They learned it from their parents. It's passed on generationally. However, the healing can only happen one person by one person. So it is my opportunity to open up, move through shame into the freedom where bliss shows up. And it's a very unique solo journey, because while another may be able to hold space for me to move towards shame, but the moving through it is over here. Freddie cannot do it for me. Of course, he can be instrumental in holding that space for me, like another who may be there, who may embellishing my shame because they may not, have freed themselves from their shame. So then we are, but it is a very personal journey. And I want to just say here that it's worth traveling that journey, because there is so much joy and bliss and ecstasy on the other side that it's phenomenal.
When we are bombarded and confronted with images and violence, hurt feelings, we go into that fight, flight, or freeze, and we do the opposite. We fold in and we shut down and we, close off. And with physical pain, it's advantageous to avoid it. It's a good idea not to drop a hammer on your toe, right? Mm-hmm. Right. But with emotional pain, it's advantageous to lean into it. and to open that up and to unpack it and take a look. Is there a different function that happens spiritually?
I wonder what you just said, if that is so. Because, like, if the hammer fell on my toe, I can be just either resisting that pain or I can breathe into the pain. Just as a heartache, a heartbreak, I can either resist it or then armor myself, like that freezing thing, or I can feel into it. So in that sense, for me, that's a spiritual practice, both with my toe as well as with which is all about letting go of resistance to what is. And when I let go of resistance, it actually hurts less. Very curious. The nervous system shifts.
It's like, in the end, we all let go, and it's inevitable for all of us. So the best preparation for the end is to learn to let go of resistance, and then move with your focus towards what you will. And it's like all this work is about that practice. And it's like Einstein said, if you study nature, you'll know everything. And it's like that seems to be in line with everything about nature and the universe. It's all about existing. And there's, it's like the equation of space, there's more space than anything else. So if you put space to anything in this life, that seems to sort of add up to an easier flow.
Yeah. So I think also in terms of relationship, perhaps the maturing in relationship has also to do with being willing to be with what is, without expectation. Now, there's a difference between expectation and intention. I may have the intention to embellish our intimate sexual experience. However, if I bring myself with great expectations that it should look a certain way, that it should feel a certain way, I will be greatly disappointed. However, when I hold like an intention, that is what I want to deepen into with my beloved, then that creates the context, and I allow myself to be surprised by what may show up. And it may be very different than what I thought it should like, but very pleasurable or joyous. So why I bring up that word expectation has to do with pain. Because when I expect something to be a certain way or that I should feel a certain way, that can produce then pain or discomfort because I may not feel like that. My body may not be in line with that. My sexual center, my yoni, as we call it in Sanskrit, in the tantric realm, which means the sacred space of a woman, she may not be up for it. And I cannot force her. What I can do is listen and ask her, what would you like? And out of that, I can ask Freddie to touch her or to hold her without expectation. And then she may awake in the middle of, wow, when I thought nothing was going to happen. So that is, again, back to flow, where we come into flow versus resistance versus suffering.
Yeah, you guys have been together for quite a long time. You said 20 years. Is that correct?
Yep, 20 years.
And you guys have been married now 2 years. Is that correct?
3 or 4? 3 years?
No, I think it was 3 years. 18.
3 years. Can you guys, I'm just curious, can you guys talk a little bit about that journey and being together so long, and then, just in the last years here, you guys decided to get married?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to say? I'm happy to say something.
I'll say something and then you can say something.
Okay.
Well, we were together and we never really thought that we had to get married, but now with the business and property and all of our stuff integrated, we're getting older. It's like, it's just easier for taxes. It's easier for if someone passes away. It's easier with Social Security. It just, in terms of the business thing, to get married and then be have that legal stuff flow a little easier. That was the big reason. And then any excuse to celebrate, We went to California, we went to the wine country, so now every day's a honeymoon,
So Freddie's so prosaic, so, so for me, it ultimately has something to do with commitment, and for me, I didn't need to have the formal, legal stamp for my commitment to flourish. So I felt very married actually to Freddie long before we actually got married. And then when he asked me, it was like, oh, that's very sweet. It was like, just further deepening the bond that was already there. And yeah, celebrating was definitely a part of it.
Now that you've been married legally for 3 years, do you feel a difference than not having that formal commitment?
I don't. I mean, I always felt the same, we're still on the journey, it's never like it was. It's never like it's going to be. It's like it is. So all of the work is about being in the now, and that's always the opportunity. So, yeah.
Yeah, so
great.
For me, it's really that question of my declaration that I live in, which is that I'm with Freddie until one of us leaves, or both of us leave this planet. And that is my context, my intentionality. And so with the legal part, it was just great to work on like another project. Like getting that marriage license. And then afterwards, a year later, we created a living trust together. It was like further solidified. So there were other dimensions that we added to an already beautiful, committed way of being with each other. In that sense, to your question, yeah, I think there is further solidification and grounding and deepening.
I was just curious about that because some of the podcast topics we've talked about in the past is that, the millennial generation actually has the lowest divorce rate, but they also have the lowest marriage rate. That a lot of them in that generation are not, committing formally to each other, and they're just kind of cohabitating. And in fact, a lot of them are keeping everything separate, keeping their finances separate, keeping their assets separate. And so there isn't this union that is being created. And so, a lot of times in the work that we're doing with that generation, we see that there's a disconnect emotionally, but also because of those physical disconnects that are occurring in their relationship already.
I think the whole marriage thing needs an update in terms of the agreements. I have this whole idea called the agreement. So what the agreement is you would, each of you would look at what you really want in the relationship, and then you would work that out, and then you would sign your name to it for a period of time, say for 4 years or 5 years or 6 or 18 years if you want to have children or whatever it might be. And then you would, at certain points, you would renegotiate it. Okay, so after it's been 5 years, so I want to have an open relationship now. Okay, or I want to have a polyamorous relationship, bring somebody else, or I want to be, but not, whatever it might be. And that's just one example. Or combine our money, or buy a house together, whatever it might be. Little things can change in the relationship, but to be able to renegotiate it, because a lot of it's kind of patriarchal too. Till death do us part. It's kind of the woman serving the man in a lot of those vows. So I know people do write their own vows, but I think that the whole idea of the commitment could be something that could be expanded on consciously.
I've often felt the same way because, it is an agreement between two people. And if one of the persons wants a different agreement, it should be able to unravel. That's important.
Yeah. Conscious uncoupling. Yeah.
Terrible with that. Yeah.
And I think it then puts more of a focus on that daily work, right? And the daily commitment, renewing that commitment every day. And it's not something that you make that commitment and then you're held to it for the rest of your life without really actually investing, in that relationship. So we agree that, it does need to be kind of updated, as you said, right?
Yeah. What if a couple came together and said, okay, let's just be together for 3 years, but in that 3 years, we want it to be a transformational experience. So you confront your jealousy, you confront your anger, you confront your possessiveness in all of the dynamics that you can think of to do it that way. And you come out a wholer, more grown person. Mm-hmm. And you might choose to stay together, because then you could actually be who each of you are within the relationship. And I think that's what gets lost. I mean, I think the biggest thing to learn in a relationship is how to allow the other to be totally who they are without our egos or our expectations or our bullshit getting in the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's why I think people break up and leave.
Now, you mentioned the word polyamory and open relationships. And, when we're talking about this deep connection with a partner, that takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of investment in that relationship. And I was wondering if you guys can talk a little bit about, what your thoughts are about polyamory or even an open relationship and how that fits in with that commitment and connection, the bonding and that sexual energy that needs to be, nurtured in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. So there is no cookie cutter approach. I think that is what we are seeing more and more, that people really look at, what is important to me and how can I co-create my relationship. There is room for my expression, perhaps beyond my primary partner. So I want to qualify this a little bit, because sometimes I hear that when people start a relationship and then it's, don't know, perhaps I should be in an open relationship. And I said, you just started this relationship. Creating relationship, just as you said, Ray, takes a lot of time, focus, learning about myself, being triggered, Why don't you practice it for a while in a one-on-one relationship? And then when you have a solid foundation, then look at, to bring someone in, or you have the agreement that both of you have a relationship with another outside of the relationship. That all can be created based on the wishes, the desires, but it needs to be done consciously without lying to each other, because that's the beginning of the end. Or we could say a great deal of hurt arises when, someone does it behind the other's back, betrayal, there's distrust then. And but it needs to be done consciously and not just like, because I want to leave the back door open.
Yeah.
And that is at times that people, they avoid the focalized presence with another and what that may bring up for me, because as you know, it's not always comfortable. And to be willing to go there and practice there. And then, as I said earlier, once there's a foundation which has to do with trust, that there is trust here, so that one or the other, when we bring it up, this is, and bringing it up that you want this first to your primary partner, so that because that's the creation here. So do we want to expand the creation? And then how is this for the other? And can the other hold space for that? Can they take it on as an opportunity versus a predicament?
Yeah, we've been in a lot of different ways in our relationship. We've been monogamous. We've been open. And when there was a time when I wanted to be with other women, and Elsbeth went through what she did, and then she allowed me within our relationship. And then more recently, she wanted to, and then now we're in a very monogamous thing, and we're loving it. And so 20 years, like I said, it's never like it was. It's never like it's going to be. It's like it is. So how can you have the emotional tools to be able to be with all the stuff that comes up on this journey,
We come very much from relationship being a creation, a conscious creation, where we have the opportunity, each of us, to grow, personally develop, and relationally develop. And so we need to be clear where our priorities are. I wouldn't want to go to someone else because I am not complete here. And I think that is something to be really looked at.
We go back to that concept of, in the physical, we want to avoid pain. In the emotion, we want to lean into pain. And I think in the spiritual, we actually want to create pain. And I mean that from a sense of pain is like a seed cracking open and an opportunity for growth. And a lot of religious practices have things like restriction of the diet or giving up of something to create an uncomfortableness to allow that. And so
wake up.
Yeah. And, this was really great. I'm so glad you guys shared what you did. And just want to ask you a final question. What is it that your partner does that they love you?
Oh. So one thing is that Freddie coming to me and connecting with me, it's like a touch point, where I just know he's there for me. I don't have to initiate it. I don't have to ask for it. He just gives it to me. It's a gift. And that is one of the many signs that are there, that I feel loved by my beloved.
Mm-hmm. Elsbeth is just a loving person. She is just where she is how she is everywhere. And so I see her with others, and I see how she's been with me for the last 20 years. And I can be a handful. And she's still loving me, and making my green juice in the morning, and, folding my clothes, and, rubbing my head, and, running the business. And she's just, doing her life, and I'm just privileged to be a part of it. So I know that she loves me. We're still together doing our thing. And, it's every day, all the time. I get her love.
That is wonderful, guys. So if our listeners want to learn more about TantraNova, where would they go? How can they get a hold of you?
Yes. So, TantraNova.com is our website, TantraNova, TantraNova, Supernova, TantraNova.com. And, I don't know if we can do that, but we would love to give the listener a little gift, which is the practice that Freddie spoke about, the conscious breathing practice into the belly that allows us to come to stillness in ourselves where intimacy arises. So if we just forward the link to you, and I don't know if there's a place where you can.
Sure.
Yeah, we can put that in our show notes.
Oh, absolutely. Great.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. So anyone interested in there, remember the web address is TantraNova.com.
Right.
Well, Freddie and Elsbeth, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. This has been really wonderful. It's always wonderful talking to you guys.
Likewise.
When this whole COVID thing loosens up, we should get together for some coffee or something. That'd be wonderful.
That would be wonderful. Maybe some stew would be great. Yeah.
It seems like we can ask, what can I get? Or we can ask, what can I give? And I think we get so much more when we do the giving.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so much less when we do the wanting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we want to wholeheartedly thank you for joining us today, and also for our listeners listening to Couple Synergy. Our passion is in helping couples have happy and healthy relationships, and this podcast gives us a fun way of bringing our knowledge and expertise to you, our listeners.
Sharing stories has been happening since the beginning of time to help people bond and heal and grow. We hope that by you guys sharing your story, it's enriched your lives and the lives of our listeners.
For all of you listening, please subscribe to our podcast and please leave us a review. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please email us at contact@couplesynergy.com. For more information about Couple Synergy and our programs such as Relationship 101, Couples Weekend Intensive, and our premier program called Couple to Couple, look us up online at couplesynergy.com.
And if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please download it and share it. And thank you for listening.
Until next time, synergize your life and synergize your love.
You have been listening to Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Couple Synergy was recorded, edited, and produced by Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Voiceover and music entitled Breathe and Let Go was recorded and composed by Gina Gonzalez.